Welcome, everyone, to our Bleacher Report NCAA Digital March Madness men's basketball look at our NCAA tournament bracket that we did after the top 16 reveal on Saturday. The men's basketball selection committee put out their top 16. And so then what I did is I took that 16 and then we put a bracket all around it. And of course, things have even changed since then. There's no question that there's been some results in the last couple of days that might tweak things. But you know what? Let's deal not dramatically, but let's deal with the bracket that certainly you see and that you saw on Saturday. We're 2 weeks away from the start of the Power 5 conferences having their tournaments. Next week, a lot of the one-bid leagues, the AQs for those are going to start to happen really beginning in the beginning of next week, and they will end the last regular season weekend for a lot of the Power 5. So we're going to start to get some AQs the following weekend. And then, of course, Champ Week, they just start coming every day down to the Selection Sunday with the Big Ten, the American, the A10, and the SEC are the headline ones that usually are on that Sunday leading into the bracket. So here's what we want to do. At this point in time, mid-February, let's take a look at the way I broke it down, and we're going to start with the South. And I'm going to tell you where I had it Saturday and things that I think might change, along the way. All right. So and remember, this is based on the selection committee's top 16. So they had Alabama as a 1 in the South. They had Baylor as a 2. They had Virginia as a 3, and their 4 was Indiana. So then I filled in the rest of that. So first off, let me deal with that top 4. The Baylor has since lost. Alabama, I think, will still hold a 1. Whether or not they stay in the South in Louisville, we'll have to wait and see how it shakes out. But I think they're going to hold a 1 spot because they're going to win the SEC. I'm pretty confident of that. Baylor, I think, will fluctuate between a 2 and a 3 between now and Selection Sunday. Virginia, I don't necessarily see them going to that 2 line. Indiana, I would actually drop down to a 5 at this point. Indiana lost on, get my days right, Tuesday night at Michigan State, and they got a hard game coming up Saturday at Purdue. So Indiana's going to lose at least 1 more, I think. They end the season with Iowa and Michigan at home, and then, of course, the Big Ten tournament. So can they still be a 4? Yes. But at this point, I probably would have shifted them to a 5. So in this bracket, you've got Pitt, Oklahoma State in an 8-9 game. I would tell you that Oklahoma State probably will end up a little bit lower than that in the 10-11 range, I think, ultimately. And Pitt, I think, probably will stay in that range. Creighton's a 5. Creighton still has had a chance of getting to a 4. They lost to Marquette. So I think 5 is the ceiling for Creighton. They certainly could go down below that. I think Oral Roberts, they already clinched their regular season, the Summit. They'll win it. Kent State or Toledo, it's going to be one of those 2. And I think the MAC champ will hold that 13 spot. So then you go to the bottom part of the South. Maryland, West Virginia. I'm not convinced West Virginia is going to stay in this bracket. They were as of Saturday, but I'm not convinced they're going to stay in this. If they do, I think they're going to be in the first 4 on Selection Sunday. Maryland, I think they can get higher than that. I think Maryland, because they got a favorable schedule, they could get into the 6-7 range by the time we get to Selection Sunday. I like Virginia as a 3. I like Yale winning the Ivy. So I'm going to keep all that. I think Michigan State's probably going to stay in that 7. Boise State, if Boise State gets in, I think they probably are going to be in the 11 range more than a 10. Things are shifting, of course. And then Youngstown State coming out of the horizon. Could that be Milwaukee? Possibly. So I feel pretty confident for the most part of our South bracket within a seed line or 2 with a couple of teams. In that South bracket, the only teams that I say right now to review that I question they're going to be in are West Virginia, Are they going to hold a spot? Is Boise State going to hold a spot? I feel pretty good about Oklahoma State still staying in there in some form or fashion. And then, of course, the AQs could fluctuate over the next couple of weeks. All right. So now let's go to our next bracket, or next part of the bracket, which is the West region. And this is where it gets interesting. So first I'm going to go over what the committee did and then how I would adjust and where I think things will end up. So you see there, Kansas was the one. Remember, the South was Louisville. The West is Las Vegas. So you've got Kansas as a 1. You've got your 2 in this bracket was Arizona. Your 3, Kansas State, and your 4, Gonzaga. So, look, this guy here, Kent State over Toledo, says I'm tripping. Again, that was on Saturday. Now I would take Toledo. So hold down. You got a context here. This was Saturday morning. I think Toledo ultimately is going to win the MAC, but we'll see. Get back to the West bracket. So first of all, this was a little controversial that Kansas was in the West, but that's where they were on the seed line, okay? I think Kansas already won again this week since this came out. I think Kansas will ultimately be a 1 seed in the Midwest in Kansas City. We're going to get momentarily that bracket, but this is where the committee put them. So I had to work with the committee's parameters. Keep that in mind. So here you got Damian saying if UCLA wins out, there'll be a 1 in the West. I think that is true. I think that UCLA could ultimately be a 1 in the West. And whose place would they take? Well, they may actually take Houston's, which we'll get to in a moment. So UCLA isn't in this grouping. We'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, Arizona too. So Arizona, they got to beat UCLA a second time to hold this spot. I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to play again in the Pac-12 tournament, I think. Probably in the championship game. The 3 here was Kansas State. I think it's a pretty good spot for K-State. They won again this week. Beat Iowa State. I think there's a good chance they're going to hold that spot. The 4, Gonzaga. Gonzaga certainly could go up to a 3. They got to beat St. Mary's probably twice. But my gut says that Gonzaga is probably going to stay on that 4 line. The 5, UConn. That's probably UConn's ceiling. UConn's got a big game Wednesday night against Providence to avoid being swept. UConn is a good example of overall body of work with UConn versus conference record, because UConn in conference is in 5th place, but they've got better numbers than almost any team in front of them outside of Marquette. So there's a good chance they're going to hold that position. The 6 here, Iowa, I think it's a little high. I think Iowa's going to end up being a 7. The 8 here, because remember, Iowa just lost to Northwestern since it came out. The 8 is Rutgers against Missouri in an 8-9 game. I kind of feel that's probably where those schools are going to be. So I'm going to leave that. The 10 is Nevada. Nevada, if they get in, they're going to be a 10 or 11, kind of like Boise. So that's their range. Feel comfortable with that. The 11 here is for Atlantic. Assuming they win Conference USA, that's where they're going to be. The 12, the always dreaded 5-12 game. You've got Charleston. Boy, that's where I think they're going to be, and that will be a very dangerous opponent if Charleston beats Hofstra. Could be Hofstra, could be Charleston. But I think that's a dangerous opponent for whoever get that 5 spot. The 13 in this bracket was Utah Valley. Again, very dangerous team. Mark Madsen, former Stanford, former Laker player. They're really good out of the WAC. I think they're going to be a 13. 14, Santa Barbara. It's going to be Santa Barbara, Irvine, maybe Hawaii, out of the Big West. That's probably where their Big West champ's going to be. Asheville, again, I feel like that's where the 15 is going to be for them. And then, of course, the 16, Alcorn State. So I actually feel really good about the West seeding, but just different placements, because I think Kansas is going to be moving to the Midwest. So, and on this bracket, the team that I would say I feel the least, comfortable with right now still would be Nevada. So again, I'm with the Mountain West about whether or not they can hold this position. and stay there. All right, so let's go to our third quadrant, if you will, in our bracket predictions from last Saturday. And this is the Midwest. So this is where I would swap, and I would have done it even before. Houston West, Kansas here. But okay, this is where the committee had. They had Houston as a 1. They had Texas as the 2, Tennessee as the 3, Xavier as the 4. This bracket is where I think we're going to see the most changed from February 18th to Sunday. I don't think Houston will stay in the 1 in the Midwest. Houston's got to play at Memphis. They could lose that game, and they certainly could play them again in the American tournament. The 2, Texas. Texas has a great overall resume. Can they hold the 2? Probably. But they could slide to a 3. But I think they probably will hold the 2. All right, so then the 3 here is Tennessee. Tennessee lost again to Texas A&M. A lot of close losses. I think Tennessee ultimately will find its way to a 4, okay? So I think the Vols are going to end up being a 4. The 4 is Xavier. Xavier has taken on some water since this came out. Lost again to lost. Oh God, I'm just this is all coming together. Anyway, they lost Tuesday night, and to me, Xavier's going to end up sliding down to the 5 line. I think ultimately that's where they're going to settle. They lost to Villanova. Thank you. So I think that they're going to end up settling in the 5 line. The 6 is in this bracket, Illinois. I kind of feel like Illinois may end up on that 7 line. Lost again this past weekend. No Terrence Shannon. They play Northwestern at home this week. I kind of feel like Illinois is going to settle more as a 7. The 7 here is Duke. I think Duke could flip with them. I think Duke could end up on the 6 line. The 8 and the 8-9 is Auburn and NC State. I feel very good about my 8-9s. And I think like that's kind of where they will be settled. The 10, Texas A&M, I think they could get to a 9. They could be in an 8-9 game. Maybe they could get to a 7. They just beat Tennessee. They got Alabama coming in. So A&M's ceiling probably is a 7, and their bottom is a 10. So they're going to be somewhere in between that. In the 11, which is the first 4 game, we've got USC and Clemson. I am not confident in Clemson staying here. I think USC will be in, maybe as a 10. Clemson, to me, is very shaky. Don't know if they can hold that spot. They lost to Louisville, which is a bad loss for the Tigers. So that's a spot that's open. Can a Carolina go in there and grab it? Can a Penn State? Maybe. I think that's where the spot is on this bracket. The 12 in this bracket, also a play-in game, or first 4, Memphis and Wisconsin. Wisconsin lost to Rutgers, so they would be out. So it's that's another spot that could be open. Wisconsin plays Iowa tonight. It's a spot that I think it's a game they got to win. Memphis lost to Houston on Sunday. So those spots are for the taking. Are they going to hold them? I think it's very tenuous. Of those 4 in the first 4 games that are all in this Midwest bracket, I would rank them USC, Memphis, Wisconsin, Clemson in terms of who could hold their position. The 13 in our bracket was Drake. It's going to be probably Drake or Bradley. Whoever wins the Valley is going to get that 13 spot. In the 14th, Kennesaw State, certainly they could hold it. 15, Colgate, I feel pretty good about them and the Patriot. And then, of course, get the 16, Samford. Could be Samford, could be Furman, could be one of them. So that's where I sort of see all that shaken out. All right, so now let's go to the East, the last quadrant here. And I feel pretty comfortable with where the East was. Okay, first of all, Purdue as a 1. They're either going to be in the East or they're going to be Louisville. Committee had them in New York. 2, UCLA. McCronin not happy about that. I think they could end up being in the West as the 2 or the 1 if they beat Arizona. They got to beat Arizona. UCLA best non-conference win is against Maryland. So they're going to be a 2 or a 1. The question is where, East or West? 3, Iowa State. I think Iowa State's going to drop to that 4 line. I'd flip them with Marquette, who's a 4 here. I think Marquette's ceiling is a 3. Huge win over Creighton. Shaka Smart's the Big East Coach of the Year in my mind. The 5, St. Mary's. St. Mary's has to beat Gonzaga to hold that position. If they don't, I could see St. Mary's dropping to a 6. The 6 here is Northwestern. If Northwestern keeps winning, they got a hard schedule. You got at Illinois, at Maryland, home Penn State, at Rutgers. You know, they're gonna be anywhere between 4 and 7. Their height is 4. Their bottom is 7, I think. So, but they're gonna be in comfortably. The 7 here, San Diego State. I like that for San Diego State. The 8 in this bracket in the 8-9 game, Arkansas and Providence. I feel actually very comfortable about, again, my 8-9s. I feel really good about that. The Kentucky at 10. Look, if Kentucky keeps winning, Kentucky can climb up. How high? I think Kentucky's ceiling is a 7. So Kentucky can go between a 7 to a 10. The 11 here is VCU. VCU coming out of the Atlantic 10, and they're my favorite to win it. I think that's where they'll be. The 12 is Southern Miss. That could be any team, but I like that for the Sun Belt in the 12 spot. 13 in this bracket is Iona, and I think Rick Pitino gets the Gales there in a 13. The 14, Eastern Washington. I really like them out of the Big Sky. The 15, Vermont. It's either going to be Vermont or Lowell in a 15 position. And the 16, the Morehead State Howard winner. Feel very comfortable, actually, about those 16s in there. So I feel pretty good about overall. You know, interesting stat. From the top 16, 65 of the 80 teams are in the top 16 the last 5 years have stayed there on Selection Sunday. And another interesting fun fact, 19 of the 20 ones stayed on the 1 or 2 line. K-Pat says Michigan State gets screwed with the 7 seed. Well, you know, they're going to have to win more games to go a little higher. I'm not quite sure that they're going to get higher. I think they could get to a 6, but 7 feels comfortable to me. Better than an 8-9. Yes, I heard you, MIFL. Kent State over Toledo questions. I think it is going to be Toledo over Kent State. Yes, Tennessee needs their starting 5 healthy, and they've lost a lot of close games. It's very true. Hugh asks how high a seed can Kentucky get. I feel pretty comfortable that they're going to get, you know, somewhere in the 7-8 range when everything's done. So I feel pretty good about that's where they'll end up. Yes, Miami currently has the longest winning streak in the country. You know, Pitt, yeah, I think Pitt will make the tournament. So again, Roberson, you're asking how West Virginia makes the tournament and Texas Tech doesn't. This was Saturday morning. You know, West Virginia clearly, I think, can play their way out. Texas Tech in. Interesting test case. Hey, I'm going to give you another team. Keep an eye on Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt won 5 in a row, beating Tennessee and Auburn at home, and then at Florida. If Vanderbilt keeps winning, there's always a team that people aren't talking about in the last 2 weeks of the regular season that goes into the conference tournament in a Power 5 league and is right there to potentially get in. And this year, I think it's Vandy. I think Vandy could sneak in to the first 4 in Dayton. Really believe that. They got to keep winning, but I could see it happening. Yes, Miami, if they could get to a 3 seed, I agree with that. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, so Ken Palm doesn't like Miami to win it. We'll see. A lot of Toledo people out here. Duke should be higher. They got Robert in Virginia. Yes, the ACC admitted that. I think, look, Duke can ultimately still get higher. So I don't think that's, you know, out of the question. Are people scared to see Kentucky in the tournament? Probably, because of their potential. Texas Tech, yes, has done well of late. They got a chance, kind of like Vanderbilt. Let's see. Yes, Kentucky's getting hot at the right time. What else we got here? Let's take a couple more. Do I see Drake getting a 12? I don't think they can. It's going to be hard. I think the Valley champ gets the 13. I think that's ultimately where they'll get. What does Missouri need to do to, says Andrew Wolf, to get in? No, I think they're going to be in. I just can't fall flat. I mean, they're right there. Losing to Mississippi State. No, they beat Mississippi State, excuse me, in overtime. They beat Mississippi State in overtime, which was huge for them. That was at home. They had a couple of missed up opportunities, but I think Missouri will be in. Again, Missouri's one of those teams that easily could be anywhere from 8-9 to first four. There's a big range for them. Does Purdue finally win it all? They could. If they got a Columbus-Louisville route, it's pretty good for them. If it ends up being Columbus-New York, it's not bad. But, they certainly have the most dominant player in the country, so there's a chance for that. They're going to be one of the teams that has a chance. There's no question. Wisconsin goes 2-2 and wins a game in the Big Ten tournament. Will that be enough? So, I think it has to be the right two. If they don't beat, if one of the two is Michigan, I don't know, I think they got to have two quality wins of the four. So, like, tonight is huge against Iowa. I think that's huge. And, yeah, they're going to have to win probably 2 games in the Big Ten tournament. Let's see. How far do I see Tennessee going? I don't know. Offensively, they struggle at times. Here's the thing. This is interesting. Illinois fan says they should be higher because they beat UCLA in Texas. So the problem is it's not straight head-to-head. It's body of work. And the metrics play a role in that. And so just because you beat those teams doesn't mean that, you have to be ahead of them seed-wise. I mean, LMU beat Gonzaga. LMU's not in here. They beat St. Mary's. So they have 2 great wins in the West Coast Conference. They don't have the full body of work. It's a whole season-long deal here. Let's see. We answered those ones about West Virginia, Texas Tech, Miami. Let's see if we can get like 1 or 2 more here. Indiana, I think they could be a Sweet 16 Elite 8 team, and then when you're there, you never know. Be interesting to see if Xavier Johnson comes back from his injury, how effective he is, and that'll certainly play a role into whether or not they legitimately have a chance to make a deep run to Houston. Look, I love Marquette. They've grown on me. Tyler Kolek, big-time playmaker, shot maker. I think Marquette definitely could be Sweet 16 team. Yes, Indiana as a 4 is their max. I agree with that. I think that's their ceiling is probably a 4. Let's see if we can take 1 or 2 more. I don't think the ACC is undervalued. I don't. It's really mediocre in the middle and at the bottom. At the top, I do think they have 2 Final Four teams. It's weird. Miami and Virginia, not Duke and Carolina. Carolina needs to win games. 0 quad 1 wins. They got to win some games here, like a lot, to go down the stretch to get in. So they definitely have their work cut out for them without question. All right. So a little house cleaning here. So tomorrow being Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern, we're going to do the same format. We're doing a Katz Ranks. So keep an eye out for that. And then on Monday, we'll be back doing our AP Top 25 reaction. So we've got, be 3 this week, and the next week. And, of course, we'll keep going into the conference tournaments. And then, of course, Selection Sunday, we'll do our bracket, the real bracket, on that Sunday night. And then going forward into the NCAA tournament. So, as always, I really appreciate everyone's engagement. following along. I'm Andy Katz. You can follow me at the Andy Katz, the real Andy Katz on Instagram, the Andy Katz on Twitter. And then, of course, follow all our coverage on Bleacher Report, NCAA Digital, and March Madness men's basketball. Appreciate it, everyone. Stay safe. Thanks for watching.